Everyone loves a good movie, and if you don't, you're probably not everyone. Everyone also loves a good D&D game, and if you don't, you probably don't play D&D. Okay, you know what? This intro is kind of falling apart. My point here is that just as some movies are amazing, some D&D games are amazing. And just as some movies completely suck, some D&D games also completely suck. and if you're here right now watching me stumble through the talkie-talkie, you probably want your D&D games to be just as awesome as your favorite movie. I mean, what Dungeon Master wouldn't? And yet at the same time, what you probably dread is running a crappy D&D game where nothing seems to go right, because after games like those, well, we all feel like losers. I mean, we're not. I am definitely not a loser. Alone in my basement, talking to a camera. No, definitely not. There are lots of fine people who are alone in their basements and they talk to themselves, and I'm among friends. So the question then is, how can we make our next game session be as amazing as The Empire Strikes Back, the Star Wars movie from the original trilogy that is routinely hailed as the best Star Wars movie ever? And how can we avoid having our game sessions flop like Attack of the Clones, which was an utter disaster. Actually, for utter disasters, look no further than The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, or The Rise of Skywalker. Those movies are mostly train wrecks, especially the last one. I know that there was a lot of drama and director wars going on with those three films, but it felt like the two directors were competing for who could make the worst movie, not the best. Anyway, I digress. Hi, I'm Luke Hart, and on this channel, I share my nearly 30 years of Game Master experience so that you can run amazing games that your players will love. And today, we're talking about 12 lessons that movies teach us about being a Game Master. And these lessons apply to almost any type of tabletop role-playing game, whether it's D&D, Pathfinder 2, Dungeon Crawl Classics, Shadowrun, Shadow Dark, Call of Cthulhu, or something else. But before we jump in, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, Chipeku. Look, a never-ending problem for game masters running online games is getting high quality digital maps. I don't know how many hours I've personally spent hunting around for just the right map for my next game. However, with Chipeku, you can get your hands on over 4,000 stunning hand-drawn fantasy maps and D&D battle maps that will take your tabletop RPGs to the next level. I mean, look at these amazing maps. Shoot, they even have animated maps. And the bang for your buck is absolutely incredible. Look, for just $5 a month, Chipeku patrons get access to their full archive of over 4,000 maps, which work seamlessly on most popular virtual tabletops and come with walls and lighting presets for Foundry VTT. So if you want to level up the action of your next game with gorgeous maps and save yourself loads of time, check out Chipeku at the link below. Okay, lessons from movies about GMing. Let's do this. Number 1, action over inaction. The game should always be moving forward. Something important to the plot, the adventure, the character, or whatever should always be unfolding. It doesn't matter if the characters are in a combat, exploration, or social interaction scene, something that your players care about needs to be happening. Action drives excitement. Furthermore, every subsequent scene of your game should seek to escalate this action, increase the stakes, increase the drama, the suspense, the conflict. For example, the action in The Empire Strikes Back is always escalating. Even the slower, more deliberate scenes, such as Luke's lessons on Dagobah and Han and Leia's interlude in the asteroid while repairing the Millennium Falcon, serve to move the story forward toward more action. And something is always happening. Luke isn't just learning, he's also running, flipping, and dodging through the jungle. Han and Leia discover they're in the belly of a beast and must escape into greater danger. On the flip side, most of the action in Attack of the Clones is Obi-Wan's investigation, leaving Anakin and Padme to awkwardly fill time with their burgeoning romance, but with no significant advancement of the story. Furthermore, the cuts between Obi-Wan and Anakin only serve to disrupt the pace of the film rather than drive the tension and action. Even the Republic Senate debates and the decision-making scenes only serve to damage that pacing even further and are really just meant to explain things to the audience rather than drive the action. Number 2, lean into conflict. I will shout this from the rooftops for as long as I have breath in my lungs. One of the Game Master's primary roles is to create conflict. Conflict drives drama. Drama drives suspense, and suspense drives interest and excitement. Look, if you want to continue to keep your players motivated to play the game and their characters motivated throughout the adventure, you must have conflict in your game. I mean, without conflict, what are you doing besides putzing around in the game world, talking to shopkeepers, and stealing from innocent street urchins? Not that I have ever done that. Who would steal from an innocent street urchin? That's like immoral or something, right? And what D&D player would do anything immoral in the game? Come on. In The Empire Strikes Back, the movie very quickly gets into the Empire attacking the Rebel base. It starts with conflict. Then the characters are forced to flee and choose to follow their own plot hooks. Luke heads to Dagobah to train so he can become a Jedi and protect his friends. But even there we find conflict. Yoda doubts his dedication, doubts he is cut out to be a Jedi, and Luke struggles to convince him otherwise. Leia needs to get back to the Rebel fleet, but she can't join the escaping ships, so Han takes her with him, setting his needs aside for his desire to protect her. But it's not all ice cream and delicious salty strips of mouth-watering bacon. No, the Millennium Falcon's hyperdrive isn't working, and Han and Lair must evade and hide from the Empire in the asteroid field. Conflict. Shoot, we even have conflict between Han and Leia as they bicker back and forth over almost everything. And that right there is a bit of foreshadowing, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. And then we have Attack of the Clones. Anakin has to fight his feelings for Padme because his duty as a Jedi in training demands it. But he pretty much just ignores that conflict and focuses on his feelings over his duty. A little later, he runs off to find his endangered mother, taking Padme, whom he was charged to guard and protect with him, into danger. There's no real conflict here, just filling in the backstory for the audience. Then Obi-Wan follows the bounty hunter to Gnosis and goes on a side adventure that really just makes up the core of the actual story of the film, creating an awkward pacing to the film itself, I might add. It moves half the story forward but seems disconnected from the rest of the film. This prolonged investigation does set some things up for future conflict in the film, but its real purpose is just to, again, fill in the backstory for the audience. These two plot threads, I could also have done this as well. These two plot threads remind me of a recap at a game session. Like, you need to know what happened last time because it impacts today's game session, but do you really want to spend all your time in the recap? No, you spit it out and you move on. You don't dilly-dally on it. Number 3, the 3-act structure. The 3-act structure has been around for centuries, but it was popularized in the 1979 book Screenplay, The Foundations of Screenwriting by Sid Field. This is the essence of the 3-act structure that all good movies follow. At a high level, the 3 acts are defined as the setup, the confrontation, and the resolution. Act 1, the setup. Here we have the inciting incident. This is where the plot hook is revealed that motivates the characters to go do the thing. The first plot point is called the setup, and soon thereafter we arrive at a pinch point where conflict and events put pressure on the characters, thus moving the action to Act 2. Act 2, the confrontation. This is where we have the rising action, where conflict and drama is unfolding as the characters learn more about the situation at hand. Then there is a turning point or setback that leads the plot of the movie in a new, unexpected direction. Here we find that the situation is worsening for the protagonist, not improving. In fact, things often look quite bleak, leading to greater tension and anticipation. This leads us to the biggest obstacle in the story and ushers us into Act 3, the resolution. The rising tension peaks into the climax, which ties up any loose ends in the story and builds up a final confrontation between protagonist and antagonist. In The Empire Strikes Back, this is Luke dueling with Darth Vader. Finally is the denouement. It's like a French word. I think it's pronounced denouement, something like that.
Denouement.
But in English we call it the wrap-up, where the aftermath is shown and the film finishes. Just like my bad pronunciation of the French language. Anyway, moving on. I am not going to break down each film because that would take a lot of time. However, suffice it to say that The Empire Strikes Back is an excellent example of the 3-act structure with clear transition points. Where Attack of the Clones is a lot muddier and harder to see the movement of the plot throughout the film's structure. In fact, when I watch Attack of the Clones, it often seems like there are 2 3-act structures in the film and that I'm watching 2 movies jammed into one. It just feels disjointed and has poor pacing and structure. I don't know how else to put it. By the way, if you're finding this information useful, please give me a thumbs up and share this video with a fellow game master. Subscribe and all that jazz. Or, just yell at me in the comments about how I'm totally wrong about the last 3 Star Wars trilogy movies that Disney used to drive the franchise into the ground. I still find it hard to believe that some folks actually like those movies, but hey, I'm just some dude in a basement talking to a camera. Like, what do I know? Number 4. Foreshadowing. We all know what foreshadowing is, but do you know what foreshadowing is for? Earlier, when I mentioned Han and Leia bickering being an example of foreshadowing, well, it was, but it isn't the type of foreshadowing you necessarily want to include in your game. You see, their bickering was foreshadowing to the audience that they would eventually get together. But when you incorporate foreshadowing into your games, you want to foreshadow to the characters, not your players. In The Empire Strikes Back, Luke's experience in the dark side cave on Dagobah foreshadows his later failure against Darth Vader and the revelation that Vader is his father. Han's mention of the bounty hunter of Ord Mantell to Leia foreshadows his eventual capture and handover to Boba Fett. Note that the foreshadowing is for the characters in the film, not necessarily for us, the audience, though we are likely to pick up on it, sure. And then in Attack of the Clones, most of the foreshadowing takes place in the Senate, away from the characters, away from the main protagonists. That's foreshadowing for the audience. Or the foreshadowing is the discovery of one character, but it foreshadows danger to another remote character and has to be relayed to them, or worse, they don't find out about it until it's too late. You may also note that in that film, the majority of the foreshadowing isn't focused on the adventure at hand, but on the original Star Wars trilogy. The Death Star schematics, Boba Fett picking up his dead father's helmet, the introduction of Anakin's half-brother Owen. All that foreshadowing is not for the characters, it's for the audience. It's a way for the film to say, look here, this is how all that came to be. Aren't we clever? At the end of the day, this sort of foreshadowing may serve the audience, but it doesn't serve the story. Number 5, the twist. Much like a movie, any good adventure includes a twist that turns the narrative on its head. This might also include a grand revelation where the characters and audience discover something critical and dramatic that was previously unknown. In The Empire Strikes Back, Luke encounters this goofy little green guy on Dagobah who seems merely to frustrate him. However, that green guy turns out to be Yoda, a Jedi Master, and Luke learns that being a Jedi isn't about being a great warrior, but about being a spiritual being. Then we have a twist upon a twist. At first, Lando, it's definitely Lando. Lando is helping Han and Leia escape the Empire, but then he betrays them to Vader. And then he betrays Vader and helps Han and Leia escape. Actually, it's not Han and Leia. He helps Chewie and Leia escape. I've watched these films a bajillion times, but again, my scriptwriter has failed me. Actually, I love the Star Wars original trilogy. Oh, it's one of the best things ever.
No, I am your father.
Do I need to say anything more? This is arguably the best twist in the history of science fiction. It's so good that it's been overused since then by copycat after copycat. And it is, of course, the grand revelation of the film as well. Moving to Attack of the Clones, first, a secret army of clones is being built for the Republic. I mean, the word clones is in the title of the adventure, so great twist. Yeah. The Separatists are being led by a fallen Jedi that we've never heard of until this adventure, so a huge opportunity for a cool twist completely missed out on. Oh, and then Count Dooku has been working on the designs for the Death Star, but the heroes don't learn about this, like, ever. Another missed opportunity. In fact, I'm not sure the film has any real twist. It's just exposition, backstory really, to tell the audience how the first trilogy, the good trilogy, came to be. And ask any player or game master and they'll tell you, backstory is backstory for a reason. You do not want to play the backstory part of the game. You want to play what happens after the backstory. Oh, and before I forget, if you missed out on backing our recent Kickstarter, Lairs and Legends 2, pre-orders are now available at the link below. And if you're watching this video way after the fact, you can pick up the books on the DM Lair store. Because, my videos get views like, years and years after I make them. Anyway, get your hands on 2 big beefy books filled with an anthology of 5th edition Game Master resources to fuel your game for years to come. You look at over 30 adventures, 100 monsters, puzzles, traps, encounters, magic items, rule sets, and more. Grab your copy of Lairs and Legends 2 at the link below. Number 6, The Setback. Every good story has a setback, a point of failure for the protagonist, where their plans seem to unravel and their goal gets further away, not closer. The power of a setback is that it plays on the audience's heartstrings, their desire to see the protagonist win, and yet it seems like they might not. This increases their engagement, amps up the tension to unfold heights, even if we know that things usually turn around, and keeps them glued to their seats. In The Empire Strikes Back, one might argue that the entire movie is setback after setback. At the end of A New Hope, the film that preceded it, the rebellion had just destroyed the Death Star, and it seemed like the Empire might be through. However, The Empire Strikes Back begins with the Empire destroying the hidden rebel base on Hoth. Then the bounty hunter captures Han Solo, who is subsequently frozen in carbonate. Then Luke battles Vader, loses his hand, loses the battle, and nearly dies. The film is a story of setback after setback, with the Empire winning and the rebellion losing. And quite frankly, I think that is half the genius of the movie. The audience is invested in these characters, and yet everything seems to be going wrong for them. What the heck is happening? Is this the end of the rebellion? Has the Empire won? And that sets the trilogy up for a masterful 3rd installment in The Return of the Jedi. You see, the truth is, the first 3 movies of the original trilogy themselves follow the 3-act structure. A New Hope is Act 1, The Empire Strikes Back is Act 2, and Return of the Jedi is Act 3. And that again reinforces our lesson about the power of the 3-act structure. Oh, if only some directors had studied this before going on to drive a beloved franchise into the ground. Yes, I am indeed looking at you, Rian Johnson, however you say your name, and J.J. Abrams. I mean, why you gotta do us like that? Number 7, the final showdown and the set piece. The final showdown is likely self-explanatory. This is when the protagonist and the antagonist clash together during the climax of the story. And the set piece is almost always part of that showdown. It's the action-packed extended scene that often features a unique location or backdrop. In The Empire Strikes Back, this is obviously the final battle between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. Not only do they have an extended battle, the final showdown, but it transitions from one dynamic and interesting location to another as they battle across the interior of Cloud City. This forms the set piece. As for the Attack of the Clones, well, there is a final showdown and set piece as Anakin and Padme fight for their lives in the arena, but ultimately they are rescued by the other Jedis and the clone army. So arguably you have a decent setup, but it is kind of ruined by a Deus Ex Machina moment, in my opinion. It's like when the players get themselves in over the head and the dungeon master swoops in and rescues them and saves their bacon. Like, that's almost never a satisfying experience. And it wasn't in that movie either. You just let the players die. I mean, just let the characters die, right? That's more satisfying than rescuing them when they clearly made some bad choices. Of course, then Anakin and Padme both be dead, and there would be no Luke Skywalker, and then you'd have no second trilogy, so I guess that didn't work, but hey, what are you gonna do? Number 8, show, don't tell. How can I put this gently? Stop lore dumping. Like, don't dump lore on the characters that isn't relevant to the adventure or campaign. Instead, reveal the necessary lore through the action rather than monologuing. In The Empire Strikes Back, the danger of Luke falling to the dark side of the Force and his similarities to Darth Vader's fall from grace aren't told to him by Yoda. No, they're shown to him by the dark side cave under the tree. Now, yes, Han does do a lot of telling, such as his explanations of who Lando Calrissian is, but his discussions and arguments with Leia are the medium of this telling, which continues to keep the lore dumps interesting and always leads to greater action. Then we have Attack of the Clones. Well, Anakin fights an entire village of sand people to get revenge for his dead mother and kills all of them, but we don't see it. He tells Padme about it after the fact. And the senators, well, they talk a lot. I mean, I guess we can't really do much about that, can we? They're just playing their role, and politicians and talking is kind of what politicians generally do, right? But we're probably best to steer clear of that topic because we'll get ourselves in trouble, won't we? Finally, Obi-Wan doesn't actually learn about what's going on with the clone army through investigation and action. Instead, he arrives on Kamino, is welcomed by the clone creators, and then given a dialogue-heavy tour of the facility. Quite literally, lots of telling, lots of talkie-talkie. Number 9, character goals and motivation. The best plot hooks in a story are those that focus on the goals and desires of the characters. If the characters are motivated to go do a thing, you can bet your next paycheck they'll do it. And the best way to motivate the characters is by playing on what they want to do to begin with. In The Empire Strikes Back, Luke wants to protect his friends and become a Jedi Knight like his father. Leia wants to defeat the Empire and bring freedom and democracy back to the galaxy. Han wants to pay off his debts, but is also torn by his loyalty to his friends and growing feelings for Leia. And what do we see then? They all receive their own hooks based on their own desire. Obi-Wan tells Luke about Yoda, Han stays one more day to rescue Luke, and Leia learns of an Imperial probe droid. In Attack of the Clones, Anakin is torn between his duty and his affection for Padme. Then Obi-Wan's motivations are jumbled. He wants to protect the Republic, be a good Jedi, be a good master, and keep control of Anakin. However, none of these motivations are clearly defined. As for the hooks the characters receive, Anakin is assigned to protect Padme after an assassination attempt, undermining his inner conflict, but trying to set up a deeper focus on that conflict, even though this never pays off in the film. Obi-Wan is given a side quest to track down this would-be assassin, which splits his motivations as well and separates him from his primary focus, Anakin. You see, both of these hooks tell the characters what to do, instead of inspiring them to pursue the adventure of their own accord. By the way, if you'd like to grab the adventure template that I use when I design my own adventures, you can pick it up for free on the DM Lair store. I'll throw a link to it down below for you. The first page of the template even includes a worksheet that helps you think through many of the same principles we're discussing in this video. Number 10. The characters are the story. Listen, the characters are the stars. They should drive the adventure forward and remain the focus of the story. I know that as a game master, you may have some ideas in your head about what should happen, but the decisions of the characters should drive the story forward, not what you want. In The Empire Strikes Back, every success or failure in the film is the result of the actions of the characters. And the cutscenes that focus on the villains don't move the adventure forward. Instead, they just foreshadow the coming conflict. However, in Attack of the Clones, we find that the characters are not in control at all. Their actions don't really matter. I mean, not really. Luke and Padme get rescued on Geonosis by a massive army of Jedi and faceless NPCs. Like, literally faceless, instead of figuring out a solution for themselves. And then the scenes with the senators move the story forward, such as giving Palpatine executive powers, without the involvement of any of the central characters. You see, the characters are quite literally helpless in the film, and at the whim of some all-powerful overlord, the director, who has decided what will happen, regardless of what the protagonists actually do. And this is the very definition of a railroad, when character decisions and actions don't matter, and the game master has already decided how things are going to turn out. Number 11, use the world and environment. The lesson here is to incorporate the setting, the world, and the environment into the narrative organically, don't force it. For The Empire Strikes Back, Hoth is cold, and Luke and Han are in danger of freezing to death. Dagobah is hot and humid, Luke is always sweating, and his X-Wing sinks into a bog. Cloud City is glamorous, but it's also hovering above a gas giant planet. And Luke ends up hanging off an antenna array in imminent danger of falling into said gas giant. Han tells Luke he looks strong enough to pull ears off a Gundark, and nobody thinks twice about it. It just isn't explained to the audience. We just accept it because it's part of the world, and we know what it means, even if we don't know what a Gundark is. I mean, I still don't know what a Gundark is, and I love Star Wars. I mean, it's technically one Google search away, and I'll know what a Gundark is, but I've just never bothered because I don't need to. I know what it means. And then we look at Attack of the Clones. Tatooine is a desert orbiting a binary star. It should be hot, but the heat never comes into play. Okay, by the time the movie leaves Geonosis, we have no idea what the climate of that planet is. It's just flat and brown. Nice. Flat and brown, just ooh, it's a good plan. And then the storms on the Waterworld of Kamino are, well, actually really well done. Wow, you see, look at that. Something positive from Attack of the Clones. And it only took us how long to figure that out? Like what are we at, 20 minutes of this video or something? But then a random guy tries to sell Obi-Wan death sticks, and Obi-Wan uses the Force to tell him to go home and rethink his life. So there is an attempt at some world building, but ultimately it's a throwaway line that does little to build the world or advance the plot. Number 12, reoccurring NPCs. Give your players someone to love or hate with people in the world, NPCs they run into again and again. In The Empire Strikes Back, the stormtroopers serve as an NPC that fills this role. There always seem to be more of them, and wow, do the protagonists hate these guys, even though they have the worst aim in the galaxy. Okay, that's a bit of a jab, obviously, but have you ever noticed that stormtroopers can never hit what they're aiming for? Maybe it's because they're firing their rifle from their hip. Like, have they ever thought to just lift it up to their eyes? Or maybe it's their helmets. I don't know. Like, it's too dark. I can't see what's going on my helmet. And then why did you design your helmets so that you can't see out of them? As for Attack of the Clones, you know what? I think we're done ragging on that movie for today. I mean, enough is enough, right? Anyway, that's just what I think. Let me know how you incorporate film techniques into your games, and if you feel that I'm being too harsh on Attack of the Clones. And don't forget to save yourself gobs of prep time and grab over 4,000 high-quality digital maps by becoming a Chipeku patron today. Now, if you'd like to learn about running a real sandbox game and not just what many folks think is a sandbox game, watch this video right here. And until next time, happy game mastering.